Today we're going to talk about two-step equations. I'm going to give you a couple of examples to do. One of the first things to think about is, first of all, what is a two-step equation? And what we're talking about is it literally is going to take us 2 steps to solve it. Before, when we were doing our one-step equations, we were just either adding, subtracting, multiplying, or dividing, and then we would wind up with our x equals something and we would get our answer. This time we're going to have to do 2 steps in order to get our variable all by itself. So one of the things to think about in our examples here is we're going to do the reverse of PEMDAS, which is our please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. So we're doing the reverse or the opposite of it. Instead of doing the multiplication division first, we're actually going to do it last. So we start with the adding and subtracting first. And let's take a look at why this works, or how this works, by doing our first example here. Let's say we have negative 6x plus 8 is equal to 14. Now, the way to think about using the reverse PEMDAS is what I keep talking about with the slasher movie, right? We've talked about how X is the star of the show. He's the guy who never dies. But we need to, everybody who's with X on that side needs to be killed off, so to speak. So all I'm looking at is my side that has X. So the 14 I'm not looking at all because that has no variable with it right now. I'm looking at the side that has the variable. Negative 6 is one of the numbers that needs to go, and 8 is also one of the numbers that needs to go. Now, just like in the slasher movies, there's safety in numbers. Right now, if we look at this, we have X and we have 6, and they are right next to each other. Let's think of them as holding hands or huddled together. But there's 2 of them. There's a negative 6 and there's an X. We have 8 here all by itself. So this is the one that's going to trip and fall in the woods, as I keep saying. So we're going to do the inverse operation to get rid of them, just like we did before. So that means I'm going to subtract 8 from this side, which means I also have to subtract 8 from this side, because I have to do the same thing to keep it equal and balanced, just like we did with one-step equations. Okay, this is gone. They cancel each other out or slashed out. So now I have this left on the left-hand side. I have negative 6x. So I'm going to rewrite it right down here. Bring down my equal sign. Remember to keep this nice and lined up. If you want to use the wall, you can use the wall. And now we have 14 minus 8. Excuse me, we get 6. Okay. Now this looks like our one-step equations that we've been doing already. So that's all I have to do here is I have to think of who am I going to get rid of. Well, this time, even though 6 and X are together, remember that X is the star of the show, so the negative 6 has to go. Since this is 6X, this means 6 times X. I'm going to do the inverse operation, or in this case, sorry, I'll do it another color. I'm going to divide by 6, negative 6, on both sides. Again, negative divided by a negative is a positive, so that's good. And I'm left, I should say, with 1x. X is going to equal, and now I have 6 divided by negative 6. Well, I know that's going to be a negative answer because a positive divided by a negative is a negative. And 6 divided by 6 is 1. This is my final answer for that two-step equation. Let's do another one. Let's say that we have 12x minus 20x is equal to 128. All right, well, this time I have x's in 2 locations. I have 12x, and then I also have negative 20x. Well, this means I have to simplify first. Nothing different. I just have to get all my like terms together. Simplify first, or think about like terms together. Again, we've already done this. We already talked about combining like terms, but I need all the x's to be together. Okay, so that means I'm going to circle my 12x. If you want to, there's a positive in front, right? Positive 12x. And I'm also going to circle my negative 20x. These are different signs, so I find the difference, treat it just like integers. That means that I get negative 8x. Oh, sorry, let me write that in another color. I get negative 8x, because the difference between 12 and 20 is 8, and the negative sign goes with the 20, which is the larger number. Again, remember absolute value for that. Now, nothing happened over here. This is still 128, but now you can see we're down to our one-step equation. We've done our first step of combining our like terms. Now I'm going to do what to both sides. If you said divide by 8, you are correct. Negative 8, excuse me. Divide by negative 8. Remember to always use the number that we're given. We have a negative 8 here, so we're going to divide by that negative 8. Because again, a negative divided by a negative gives me a positive, and I want my x to be a positive x all by itself. And there it is, positive x. Remember, technically, there's a little 1 in front of it, but I don't need to have the 1 there. So since I don't need him, I'm actually going to not put him there. Because just seeing the x by himself, we know there's only 1. And then we have 128 divided by negative 8 gives me negative 16. Here is my answer here. Okay, let's say that we have this one. We have x divided by negative 2 minus 16 is equal to 31. Again, I need to undo, or I'm going to get rid of anything that's alone first. I'm not looking at the side with 31. I'm looking at the side that has my variable. So the person who's alone is negative 16 or minus 16. In order to get rid of that, I need to add 16 to both sides. Again, x and negative 2, even though they're on top of each other, they are there together. They're together in our little slasher movie analogy. Negative 16, he's the one that went off to go find out what that noise was. So negative 16 plus 16, they cancel out. So I'm left on the left-hand side with just x over negative 2, which is the same thing as saying x divided by negative 2. Again, keep my equal signs lined up. And then I have 31 plus 16 gives me 47. Okay, now I need to see who do I need to get rid of now. Again, we're always looking at the side of the variable. X is with negative 2. So we're going to go ahead and do, since it's x divided by negative 2, I need to do the inverse operation, which is to multiply by negative 2 on both sides. So I'm going to times by negative 2 over 1 over here, if I want to do it that way, or just negative 2. And on the right-hand side, 47 times negative 2. Remember that this cancels out because a negative 2 divided by negative 2 gives me 1. I wind up with 1 over 1 times x over 1, which gives me the x all by itself, which is what I want, or 1x. But I want x all alone, and that is 1x there. And then we have 47 times negative 2. It gives me negative 94. Okay, let's say we have this one. We have 3 minus 3/4 x is equal to negative 6. Well, again, I need to get rid of the number that's alone first. The one that's alone is the 3. So I need to subtract 3 from both sides to get rid of the 3, because I'm always doing the inverse operation. Minus 3, and then minus 3 over here. This cancels out or slashes out. So you have to look at everything we have left over here. Remember, we have our sign to contend with. So on the left-hand side, we have a negative 3/4 x is equal to, now again, these are integers, negative 6, negative 3. When I have like signs, think of it as integers. Like signs, I add and keep the sign. So I get a negative 9. Okay. Now, what I'm doing here is I'm multiplying x by negative 3/4. Since I'm multiplying by a fraction, I need to do the inverse operation, or the multiplicative inverse, in order to get rid of that. So I'm going to multiply by the reciprocal. So I'm going to times by 4 over 3, which is a negative, though. Again, I need it to be a negative. If I do that on the left-hand side, I must do the same thing on the right-hand side. But I'm going to do this. This is going to be over 3. This is going to be over 1. Remember, any whole number I can, or any integer, excuse me, I can put it over 1, and I still have -9. So -9 over 1 is the same as -9. All right, left-hand side, these all cancel out. Everything cancels out. A negative times a negative is a positive, so I'm left with x. Exactly what I want. X is by himself now. The 4/3, they're the one that died. Now we have -9 over 1 times -4 over 3. Well, I can simplify before I multiply. So I'm going to simplify my 3 and my 9. 3 divided by 3 is 1, because 3 goes into 3 one time. 3 also goes into 9 3 times. 3 times 3 is 9. Makes my life a little easier, because now I have a -3 times a -4. Negative times a negative is a positive. And 3 times 4 is 12. I don't need the 1 because it's 12 over 1, and any number over 1 is going to be that number on the top. So my answer there is x is equal to 12. Now sometimes we get some strange ones here. So this one does not follow our usual steps. I'm going to write this in another color. Okay, this one does not follow our regular steps. And I'll show you why here. So now what we have is this. We have h minus 6 over 7 is equal to -10. Okay, well, I don't like the looks of this because I can't really work with a fraction that has a variable as part of the fraction on the top, because I know I cannot do h minus 6. So I got to do something here so that I don't have a fraction anymore. The only thing I can do is get rid of the 7 first. I have to start here and get rid of the 7. Okay, because again, it's also that idea of who is with who. I still have a -6 with the h, so they kind of go together. 7 is the one that's going to get killed off here. All right, I'm dividing the top divided by 7. So that means I'm going to have to do the inverse operation to get rid of that. So the inverse of dividing is to multiply. So I'm going to times by 7 over here. And I'm also going to times by 7 over here. All right, when I do that, this cancels out. 7 over 1, because remember this is like 7 over 1. That cancels out. And I'm left with everything I have on the top here, because that's going to be all that over 1. Well, remember, anything over 1 is itself. So that means that h minus 6, I can leave it just like that, is equal to -70, because a negative times a positive is a negative, and 10 times 7 is 70. All right, now this looks like my one-step equation, so it looks much better. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to add 6 to both sides, because 6 is what has to go. Cancels out. So now I have h is equal to -64. So even though it doesn't follow our rules of our two-step equations, it still works out, because I just need to get rid of the number that's on the bottom for the denominator. That's what I need to do there on that one. We'll do one more. Okay, on this one, what we need to do is we actually are going to translate our problem and then solve it. The quotient of a number and -2 added to -8 yields 10. So what that's going to look like is the quotient is division. So the quotient is x of a number and -2. So x divided by -2. So the quotient, remember when we're doing this, quotient of a number and -2. So that's why I have x over -2. Added to, I'm going to add this to -8. Yields, it's one of my words I can use for equals, 10. And I should have done this, -8, because that kind of goes together there. Okay? So there's my problem, and now I'm going to go ahead and solve it from here. It's the same thing we've already done, so I need to get rid of any number that is all by himself that's on the side with a variable. Negative 8 is all by himself. That means I'm going to add 8. I'm going to also add 8 over here. Oh, actually, excuse me. No, I'm not. Let's do this again. Remember, I have double signs. I don't like double signs. I was just saying that. We don't like double signs. We want that to be a subtraction, okay? So that means I'm going to make that subtraction. So that's going to become a minus. And now that is the minus 8. So now I am still going to add 8 to both sides, but definitely still want to get rid of those double signs first. And I'm going to add 8 over here. This slashes out. So I have x over negative 2. Remember to keep the equal sign nice and lined up always. If you need to, use that wall. And then 10 plus 8 is 18. Okay, now I need to get rid of the negative 2. In order to get rid of the negative 2, that's x divided by negative 2, so I'm going to multiply by negative 2 on both sides. This cancels out, and I'm left with x. X equals negative 36. And there's my answer right here. Okay, so that in essence is our two-step equations. There are probably some more examples I could show you, but this is going to get you a good start. Remember to take notes on this information. Hopefully you've already done so. And of course, answer all the questions as needed. Have a great night.